The night air in New Phoenix bit at Ryan Mercer's exposed skin as he stepped out the back door of the Vexillian hospital. His shift had ended late, again the atmospheric regulation systems requiring more maintenance than usual. The turquoise neon lights from the hospital signage cast an eerie glow across the narrow alley, creating long shadows that seemed to reach out like spectral fingers. Ryan pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders. Despite being an atmospheric technician, he couldn't help but feel the chill tonight was unusually penetrating. The sterile, emotionless atmosphere of the medical facility always left him feeling drained. 12 hours of adjusting oxygen levels, pressure controls, and temperature regulators had left his eyes bloodshot and his muscles aching. New Phoenix had changed so much since the Vexillian Health Authority had established their main Earth branch here. The alien medical conglomerate had brought advanced technology and treatments that had revolutionized healthcare. But something about their clinical efficiency always unsettled Ryan. They saved countless lives, yes, but their approach to medicine seemed to lack something essential, something human. He was halfway down the alley when he heard it, a soft mechanical whirring, followed by the subtle hiss of hydraulic doors. Ryan turned to see the hospital's rear service entrance sliding open. Two Vexillian medical officers emerged, their tall, thin frames silhouetted against the harsh interior lights. They were pushing a gurney. Ryan instinctively stepped back into the shadows. He didn't want to engage with the Vexillians at this hour. Their large, faceted eyes made it difficult to read their expressions, and their formal, stilted way of speaking always made him uncomfortable. Resource allocation is clear in this case, one Vexillian said to the other, their voice having that characteristic metallic resonance. Treatment protocol requires 147 resource units. The subject's status does not justify this expenditure. Agreed, the second Vexillian responded. Probability of recovery is below threshold for continued intervention. Documentation has been filed. They stopped the gurney in the alley, pressed a button to release its brakes, and turned back toward the door. Neither of them looked at what they were leaving behind. The door hissed shut behind them, and silence returned to the alley. Ryan remained frozen for a moment, unsure of what had just happened. Had they just abandoned a patient outside? He approached the gurney cautiously, heart racing. Lying on the gurney was a female Lumidian. Her translucent skin, normally glowing with a soft bioluminescence, appeared dull and patchy. Ryan had seen Lumidians before. Their species had been among the first non-terrestrial races to establish diplomatic relations with Earth. But he had never seen one in such a condition. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and irregular. Her body temperature, normally several degrees cooler than a human's, seemed dangerously low, even to Ryan's untrained assessment. Through her nearly transparent skin, he could see her internal organs functioning weakly, the rhythmic pulsing of her light-producing glands faltering. There was a patient chart attached to the end of the gurney. Ryan grabbed it and squinted to read in the dim light. Subject, female Lumidian, approximately 32 Earth years. Condition, stellar cascade syndrome, advanced stage. Prognosis, terminal without intensive resource intervention. Recommendation, palliative care only, release to environment. Notes, resource allocation request denied by Central Medical Authority. Release to environment. They had just dumped her in an alley to die because treating her would be too resource-intensive. Ryan felt a surge of anger. This was the dark side of the Vexillian approach to medicine that humans whispered about. The cold calculation that determined who was worth saving, based on some algorithmic assessment of resources versus outcomes. The Lumidian's eyes fluttered open briefly. They were large, with pupils that seemed to contain swirling galaxies of light. They focused on Ryan for just a moment before closing again. "Hey," Ryan said softly, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Her skin felt cold and slightly rough, like fine sandpaper. "Can you hear me?" There was no response, but he noticed a slight increase in the pulsing of her internal light organs. She was aware of his presence at least. Ryan looked around desperately. What could he do? He couldn't take her back into the Vexillian hospital. They had already made their decision. Human hospitals weren't equipped to handle Lumidian physiology. He couldn't just leave her here to die slowly in the cold alley. Then an idea struck him. Crazy, perhaps even dangerous, but the only option he could think of. Kazara, the Arcturan veterinarian who had set up a practice on the outskirts of New Phoenix. Arcturans were known for their comprehensive understanding of xenobiology. They treated pets and working animals from dozens of different worlds. If anyone might know how to help a Lumidian outside the Vexillian system, it would be an Arcturan. Decision made, Ryan quickly released the brake on the gurney and began pushing it toward the street. He would need to get transportation. His small electric scooter wouldn't work for this. As he reached the end of the alley, he used his wrist communicator to call for an autonomous taxi large enough to accommodate the gurney. He was taking an enormous risk. Interfering with Vexillian medical decisions was technically a violation of the Earth-Vexillian Health Accord. But looking at the dying Lumidian, her light fading literally before his eyes, he knew he couldn't do anything else. The taxi arrived within minutes, its side door sliding open to reveal a spacious interior. Ryan carefully maneuvered the gurney inside, securing it to the floor anchors. Arcturan Veterinary Clinic North Sector. He instructed the taxi's AI. Priority speed. As the vehicle pulled away from the curb, Ryan wondered what he was getting himself into. But when the Lumidian's hand suddenly grasped his, cold and weak but deliberately seeking contact, he knew that whatever trouble might come, he was making the right choice. The Arcturan Veterinary Clinic was a curious blend of Earth architecture and alien design sensibilities. The main structure resembled a traditional southwestern adobe building, but its windows were curved in the distinctive Arcturan style, and the roof featured several crystal domes that collected and refracted the desert sunlight. It was nearly midnight when the taxi pulled up to the clinic's entrance. To Ryan's relief, lights were still on inside. Kazara was known for keeping irregular hours, often working through the night when it suited her. Getting the gurney out of the taxi and through the clinic's front door was a challenge, but Ryan managed it with careful maneuvering. The reception area was empty, but soft instrumental music played from hidden speakers, a mix of Earth classical and Arcturan harmonic sequences that created an oddly soothing atmosphere. "Hello," Ryan called out. "Kazara, are you here? I have an emergency." A door at the back of the reception area slid open, and Kazara emerged. Like all Arcturans, she had a vaguely feline appearance. Sleek, blue-gray fur covered her body, and her ears were large and pointed. Her 4 amber eyes blinked in surprise at the sight of Ryan and the gurney. "Ryan Mercer," she said, her voice melodic but with a slight rasp. "What is this? Why have you brought—" She stopped abruptly as she approached the gurney and saw its occupant. "A Lumidian here. I didn't know where else to go," Ryan explained quickly. "The Vexillians just left her outside to die. Said treating her would take too many resources." Kazara's ears flattened against her head, an Arcturan expression of disapproval. "Typical Vexillian efficiency logic," she muttered. She leaned over the Lumidian, examining her with experienced eyes. One of her 6-fingered hands gently lifted one of the Lumidian's eyelids, while another checked the pulse at her neck. "How bad is it?" Ryan asked anxiously. "Bad," Kazara said grimly. "But not necessarily hopeless. Help me get her into the examination room." Together, they wheeled the gurney through the door Kazara had emerged from and into a large, well-equipped room. Unlike the sterile white environments of human or Vexillian medical facilities, Kazara's examination room was painted in soothing earth tones. The equipment, though obviously advanced, was integrated into the space in a way that made it seem less intimidating. Kazara moved with practiced efficiency, attaching monitoring devices to the Lumidian's body and studying the readings on a holographic display that appeared above the examination table. "Stellar cascade syndrome," she murmured, confirming the Vexillian diagnosis. Advanced stage. What is that? Ryan asked. Can you treat it? Kazara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, an Arcturan gesture indicating deep thought. It's a condition that affects Lumidians when they're far from their home star system for extended periods. Their internal light-producing organs begin to fail, causing a cascading shutdown of other bodily systems. And the treatment? Complicated, Kazara said. The Vexillians use a synthetic enzyme that stimulates the light organs, but it's expensive and difficult to manufacture. That's likely why they determined she wasn't worth the resources. Her ears twitched with annoyance. But there are alternatives. Ryan felt a surge of hope. What kind of alternatives? There's a bioluminescent algae that grows in the subsurface oceans of Europa. It produces compounds similar to the enzymes in Lumidian light organs. In my practice, I've used derivatives of this algae to treat similar conditions in other bioluminescent species. Europa. Ryan's hope dimmed slightly. That's not exactly around the corner. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, was a restricted research zone. The subsurface ocean beneath its icy crust had been found to contain unique life forms, and access was tightly controlled by the Earth Alliance Science Division. No, it's not, Kazara agreed. And I don't have any of the algae extract on hand. It's not something I use frequently enough to keep in stock. Ryan looked down at the Lumidian, whose breathing had become even more labored. How long does she have? Kazara's ears drooped slightly. At the current rate of deterioration, perhaps 72 hours, maybe less. Ryan ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. If I could somehow get to Europa and back with this algae, could you use it to treat her? All 4 of Kazara's eyes widened in surprise. Theoretically, yes. But Ryan, that's not a simple undertaking. Europa is heavily regulated. The research stations don't just hand out samples to anyone who asks. But it's possible. Kazara hesitated, then nodded. With the right connections and a very fast ship, yes, it's possible, but... Then I'll find a way, Ryan said, determination hardening his voice. Can you keep her stable until I get back? I can try, Kazara said. I can place her in a stasis field that might slow the progression of the syndrome. But Ryan, you need to understand the risk you're taking. Interfering with a Vexillian medical decision traveling to a restricted zone. These are serious violations. Ryan looked at the Lumidian again. In the better light of the examination room, he could see more details of her features. She was beautiful in an alien way, her facial structure delicate and harmonious. Through her translucent skin, he could see the weakening pulses of light that were her life force. I can't just let her die, he said simply. Kazara studied him for a moment, all 4 eyes blinking in that sequential pattern that indicated she was evaluating him. Then she nodded. Very well. I'll do what I can here. You have 72 hours at most. I'll need connections, Ryan said. Someone who can get me to Europa quickly and help me navigate the research station protocols. I might know someone who knows someone, Kazara said. She went to a console and entered a series of commands. There's a trader named Dex who operates in the gray market. He specializes in finding things that are difficult to obtain. He might be able to help you with transportation. She transferred a contact code to Ryan's wrist communicator. Tell him Kazara sent you. And Ryan, be careful. The Vexillians don't take kindly to interference in their medical decisions. Ryan nodded grimly. I'll be back as soon as I can. What's her name? He asked, looking at the Lumidian. Kazara checked the patient chart that had been attached to the gurney. According to this, her name is Vanra. Vanra, Ryan repeated softly. I'll be back, Vanra. Hold on. As he turned to leave, he felt a gentle touch on his arm. It was Kazara. What you're doing, she said quietly, is exactly why I chose to practice medicine on Earth. Your species understands something that the Vexillians have forgotten. That medicine is not just about efficiency and resources. It's about compassion. Ryan smiled weakly. Let's hope compassion is enough to save her. With that, he hurried out into the night, already using his communicator to contact the mysterious Dex. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the subsurface oceans of Europa was Vanra's only hope for survival. The lower markets of New Phoenix existed in a curious legal gray area. Technically permitted under Earth Alliance commerce regulations, they operated with minimal oversight, creating a haven for those trading in goods and services that skirted the edges of legality. Ryan had never visited this part of the city before. The narrow streets were crowded with a diverse mix of humans and non-terrestrials, all buying-selling, or simply observing the chaotic commerce around them. Holographic advertisements flickered in multiple languages, and the air was thick with the mingled scents of exotic foods, mechanical lubricants, and alien pheromones. According to Kazara's instructions, Dex operated out of a small shop near the center of the market district. The establishment bore no sign, only a simple holographic symbol that changed color periodically, a signal to those in the know that business was being conducted inside. Ryan pushed through the beaded curtain that served as a door and found himself in a cluttered space filled with artifacts and items from dozens of worlds. Behind a counter crafted from what appeared to be the hull section of an old shuttle sat a being that Ryan recognized as a Centaurian, humanoid in general appearance, but with distinctly copper-toned skin and 6 fingers on each hand. "You Dex?" Ryan asked. The Centaurian looked up from a small device they had been tinkering with. "Depends who's asking," they replied, voice surprisingly melodious for such a gruff-looking individual. "Kazara sent me." At the mention of the Arcturan veterinarian, Dex's demeanor changed subtly. They set down their tools and gestured for Ryan to approach the counter. "The good doctor doesn't send people to me unless it's important," Dex said. "What do you need?" Ryan explained the situation as concisely as possible. The abandoned Lumidian, the diagnosis of stellar cascade syndrome, and the need to obtain the bioluminescent algae from Europa within 72 hours. As he spoke, Dex's expression grew increasingly thoughtful. When Ryan finished, the Centaurian let out a low whistle. "You're not asking for much, are you?" Dex said, sarcasm evident in their tone. "Just illegal medical intervention passage to a restricted research zone and acquisition of a controlled biological specimen. All in 3 days." Ryan's heart sank. "So it's impossible." "I didn't say that," Dex corrected him. "Difficult, dangerous, and expensive, yes. Impossible, no." They tapped their 6-fingered hand on the counter rhythmically, thinking. "You'll need a fast ship with a captain who doesn't ask too many questions. Someone with experience navigating EA security protocols." "Do you know someone like that?" Dex's copper-toned face broke into a sly smile. "As it happens, I do. Captain Hardy of the independent freighter Persistent, former EA security officer who decided the private sector offered better opportunities. He's got the skills, the ship, and the attitude for a job like this." "Where can I find him?" "He's currently docked at Platform C in the orbital transfer station, preparing for a supply run to the Mars colonies." Dex accessed a terminal behind the counter. "I can send him a message, let him know you're coming." "Thank you," Ryan said sincerely. "What's your fee?" Dex waved a dismissive hand. "Kazara removed a parasite from my secondary respiratory system last year that 3 other doctors said was inoperable. Consider this partial repayment of that debt." The Centaurian's fingers danced over the terminal for a moment. "There. Message sent. Hardy will expect you at docking bay C-17 within the hour. But Ryan," Dex's voice grew serious, "you should understand what you're getting into. The Vexillians have a lot of influence with the EA administration. If they discover what you're doing, they could make things very difficult for everyone involved." "I understand the risk," Ryan said. "But I can't just let her die when there's a chance to save her." Dex studied him with an unreadable expression. "Humans," they finally said, shaking their head. "Always making decisions with your emotions instead of logic. It's your species' greatest weakness, and your greatest strength." Ryan wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he simply thanked Dex again and turned to leave. "One more thing," Dex called after him. When you reach Europa, contact a researcher named Dr. Hamish. Tell him the debt from the Io incident can be considered cleared if he helps you." Dr. Hamish got it. "And Ryan," Dex added. "Move fast. The Vexillians are efficient in all things, including tracking down those who interfere with their protocols." With that ominous warning echoing in his mind, Ryan hurried to the nearest transit station. He needed to get to the orbital platform quickly. The journey to the orbital transfer station took less time than Ryan had anticipated. Emergency shuttle services operated continuously between New Phoenix and the orbital infrastructure, and he was able to board one almost immediately. As the shuttle ascended through Earth's atmosphere, Ryan tried to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. His life had taken an unexpected turn the moment he had decided to investigate that gurney in the alley. Now he was embarking on an illegal mission to save the life of a Lumidian he had never met before tonight, risking his career and possibly his freedom in the process. He wondered what Vanra was like when healthy. Lumidians were known for their artistic sensibilities and deep philosophical thinking. Their natural bioluminescence gave them a unique perspective on light and shadow that influenced their cultural expressions. What had brought Vanra to Earth so far from her home system? How had she ended up alone, with no one to advocate for her, when the Vexillians made their cold calculation about her worth? The shuttle docked with the orbital transfer station, interrupting Ryan's thoughts. The station was a massive structure, a hub connecting Earth to the wider solar system. Ships of various sizes and designs were docked along its multiple arms, from small personal crafts to massive interplanetary freighters. Ryan made his way through the bustling concourse to Platform C. It catered primarily to independent operators, smaller ships that weren't part of the major transport conglomerates. The atmosphere here was noticeably different from the rest of the station. Less corporate, more diverse, with a slight edge of lawlessness that reminded Ryan of the lower markets. He found docking bay C-17 and approached the security checkpoint. A bored-looking human officer scanned his ID and raised an eyebrow. "Purpose of visit?" the officer asked mechanically. "Business meeting with Captain Hardy of the Persistent," Ryan replied, trying to sound confident. The officer checked something on his terminal, then nodded. "You're expected. Proceed." Heart pounding with nervous energy, Ryan passed through the checkpoint and entered the docking bay. The Persistent was smaller than he had expected, a compact freighter designed for speed rather than capacity. Its hull bore the scars of long service patches of newer material, contrasting with the weathered surface around them. At the base of the boarding ramp stood a tall, lean man with close-cropped gray hair and the ramrod-straight posture of someone with military training. He watched Ryan's approach with evaluating eyes. "Captain Hardy," Ryan asked as he reached the ramp. The man nodded once. "You're the one Dex messaged about, the atmospheric technician with the dying Lumidian." "Yes, my name is Ryan Mercer. I need passage to Europa as quickly as possible." Hardy's expression remained neutral. "Let's talk inside. Too many ears out here." He turned and ascended the ramp without waiting to see if Ryan followed. After a moment of hesitation, Ryan hurried up the ramp and into the ship. The interior of the Persistent was surprisingly well maintained compared to its exterior. The corridors were clean, the systems appeared to be in excellent working order, and there was none of the jury-rigged quality that characterized many independent vessels. Hardy led him to a small briefing room and gestured for Ryan to sit at a table bolted to the floor. Once they were both seated, Hardy fixed Ryan with a penetrating stare. "Dex said you need to get to Europa Research Station Alpha, obtain a sample of bioluminescent algae, and return to Earth within 72 hours. Is that accurate?" "Yes," Ryan confirmed. "A Lumidian is dying of stellar cascade syndrome. The algae contains compounds that could save her life. And the Vexillians have refused treatment. They abandoned her outside their hospital, said she wasn't worth the resources." Hardy's expression darkened slightly. "Sounds like them. Numbers and efficiency above all else." He leaned back in his chair. "You should know that what you're proposing is illegal on multiple levels. Earth Alliance regulations tightly control access to Europa. The research stations there Don't just hand out biological samples to anyone who asks. And interfering with Vexillian medical decisions violates the health accord. I know the risks, Ryan said, but I'm not going to just let her die when there's a chance to save her. Hardy studied him for a long moment. Why, what's this Lumidian to you? The question caught Ryan off guard. He hadn't had time to examine his own motivations too deeply. Nothing, I guess. I just couldn't walk away. The Vexillians left her in an alley like garbage. It wasn't right. A hint of a smile touched Hardy's lips. No, it wasn't. He tapped his fingers on the table, considering. I can get you to Europa in about 30 hours, using a Jupiter slingshot trajectory. That would leave you roughly 24 hours to obtain the algae, and another 18 to return to Earth. Hope surged in Ryan's chest. So you'll help? I didn't say that yet, Hardy cautioned. There are complications. Europa Research Station Alpha is currently under quarantine protocols due to a containment breach in one of their laboratories. No ships are officially permitted to dock. Ryan's hope faltered. Is there any way around that? Possibly. I have a contact at Research Station Beta, an independent facility operated by the European Space Agency. They maintain their own submersibles for oceanic exploration. If your Dr. Hamish is stationed there, he might be able to help us obtain the algae. And if he's not? Hardy shrugged. Then we improvise. He stood up abruptly. I'll need 10,000 credits as a down payment. Another 20 upon successful completion. The amount was staggering. Nearly a year's salary for Ryan. I don't have that kind of money with me. I figured as much, Hardy said. Which is why I already contacted Kazara. She's transferring the funds from her clinic's emergency account. Ryan was stunned. She's doing that for a patient she just met? Apparently, Hardy said, looking slightly amused. You both share a rather impractical sense of compassion. It's refreshing in its way. He checked something on his wrist communicator. The funds have cleared. We leave in 30 minutes. I suggest you use that time to send any messages you need to. Once we're underway, all communications will be restricted to avoid detection by EA monitoring systems. Ryan nodded, suddenly realizing the reality of what he was doing. He would be absent from his job without explanation. People would wonder where he had gone. But next to Vanra's life, these concerns seemed trivial. I'm ready whenever you are, Captain. Hardy nodded approvingly. Good. Welcome aboard the Persistent, Mr. Mercer. Let's go save your Lumidian. As the Persistent disengaged from the orbital station, Ryan sent a brief message to his supervisor, claiming a family emergency. It wasn't much of a cover story, but it might buy him a few days before anyone started asking serious questions. The ship accelerated smoothly, its engines more powerful than its modest exterior suggested. Through a viewport, Ryan watched Earth grow smaller behind them, a blue-green sphere wrapped in the gossamer threads of orbital infrastructure. First time leaving Earth? Hardy asked, noting Ryan's fascination with the view. No, but I've never gone farther than the lunar colonies before. Hardy smiled slightly. Well, you've picked quite the trip for your deep space debut. Jupiter is a long way from home. The captain led Ryan on a brief tour of the ship. The Persistent was designed for a small crew, just Hardy himself, and an Araxian engineer named Grex, who was introduced to Ryan in the engine room. Grex was a stocky, exoskeleton-clad being, with multifaceted eyes and extraordinarily dexterous hands, currently deep in the workings of a power conduit. Human wants to steal algae from Europa, Grex asked, after Hardy explained their mission. The Araxian's translator rendered their speech in clipped, simplified English. Sounds dangerous. Fun dangerous. Grex approves. Grex used to work for a mining corporation in the asteroid belt, Hardy explained. Left when they tried to cut corners on environmental systems. Has a strong sense of justice, similar to your own. Corporations always same, Grex commented, manipulating something in the engine with practiced ease. Profit first, people later. Vexillian's worst kind. Numbers without heart. Ryan found himself warming to the blunt-spoken engineer. Can the ship really make it to Jupiter and back in the time we have? Grex's multifaceted eyes gleamed with what might have been pride. Persistent not look special, but Grex modify engines. Very fast. Very efficient. Use slingshot around Jupiter, save fuel gain speed. The engineer made a sweeping gesture with one of their limbs. Like elegant dance through space. Grex is being modest, Hardy added. The modifications they've made to this ship would make most aerospace engineers weep with envy. We'll get there in time. After the tour, Hardy showed Ryan to a small cabin where he could rest during the journey. You should get some sleep, the captain advised. Once we reach Europa, things will likely get complicated. Left alone, Ryan found himself too wired to sleep, despite his exhaustion. His thoughts kept returning to Vanra, lying in stasis in Kazara's clinic. Would she survive until he returned? Would the algae really be able to treat her condition? And what would happen afterward when the Vexillians discovered what he had done? Eventually, fatigue overcame his racing mind, and he drifted into an uneasy sleep, filled with dreams of pulsing light fading into darkness. He was awakened sometime later by a gentle chime from the cabin's communication system. Hardy's voice followed. "Mr. Mercer, we're approaching Jupiter. You might want to see this." Groggily, Ryan made his way to the bridge. The sight that greeted him through the main viewport took his breath away. Jupiter loomed massive before them, its swirling bands of clouds creating a hypnotic pattern of ochre cream and rusty red. The planet's sheer scale was difficult to comprehend. A world so vast it could swallow Earth many times over. "It's incredible," Ryan murmured. "Never gets old." Hardy agreed, his hands moving over the navigation controls with practiced precision. "We'll be using Jupiter's gravity to accelerate us toward Europa. It's a technique that saves fuel and time, but it requires careful calculation. And if the calculations are wrong..." Hardy's expression remained impassive. "Then we either crash into Jupiter's atmosphere or get flung off into deep space. But don't worry, Grex and I have done this maneuver dozens of times." Somehow, that wasn't as reassuring as the captain might have intended. The ship began to vibrate slightly as they entered Jupiter's gravitational influence. Ryan gripped the edge of a nearby console to steady himself. "Approaching optimal trajectory." Hardy announced more to himself than to Ryan. "Grex, give me everything the engines have got on my mark." "Engines ready," came Grex's voice over the intercom. "We'll be glorious, swing around gas giant." Hardy's eyes were fixed on the navigational display. 3, 2, 1, mark. The Persistent surged forward with acceleration that pressed Ryan back against the bulkhead. Through the viewport, he could see Jupiter seeming to rush toward them at alarming speed. For a terrifying moment, he was certain they were going to crash directly into the massive planet. Then, Hardy executed a precise series of adjustments, and the ship's trajectory curved sharply, riding the edge of Jupiter's gravitational field. The giant planet now appeared to rotate past them, its massive bulk sliding by in a symphony of swirling storms and atmospheric bands. Ryan felt a momentary sensation of weightlessness as the ship reached the apex of its slingshot trajectory, followed by another surge of acceleration as they were flung outward now on a direct course for Europa. "Beautiful execution," Hardy said with satisfaction. "That shaved nearly 8 hours off our transit time. We'll reach Europa in approximately 16 hours. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That was intense." Hardy's lips quirked in a small smile. "Space travel isn't for the faint of heart, Mr. Mercer, but it has its rewards." He gestured toward a smaller view screen that showed an image of Jupiter's moons. "See that little white dot? That's Europa, our destination." Ryan stared at the tiny speck with newfound determination. Somewhere on that distant moon was the key to saving Vanra's life. All he had to do was reach it. The next 16 hours passed in a strange blend of anxious anticipation and monotony. Ryan alternated between restless sleep conversations with Hardy and Grex and watching the gradually enlarging image of Europa on the ship's monitors. As they approached, the moon's distinctive features became clearer. A smooth, ice-covered surface, crisscrossed with dark lines like cracks in a marble. Beneath that frozen shell lay a vast saltwater ocean, warmed by tidal interactions with Jupiter and containing one of the solar system's most remarkable ecosystems. "We're picking up a transmission from Research Station Alpha," Hardy announced, as they entered Europa's orbit. "It's an automated quarantine warning. Confirms what we already knew. No ships are being permitted to dock." "So, what's our plan?" Ryan asked anxiously. "First, we attempt to contact Dr. Hamish at Research Station Beta," Hardy said. "If Dex's information is correct, and there's a debt to be repaid, we might be able to arrange a discreet transfer of the algae samples." "And if that doesn't work?" Hardy's expression grew more serious. "Then I have a few other options, none of which are strictly legal or safe." He opened a communication channel and entered a series of codes. After several tense moments, a response came through. "This is European Space Agency Research Station Beta. Identify yourself and state your business." The voice was crisp, professional, and distinctly wary. "This is Captain James Hardy of the Independent Freighter Persistent," Hardy replied. "We're seeking to speak with Dr. Hamish on a matter of some urgency." There was a pause then. "Captain Hardy, this is a restricted research facility. Dr. Hamish is currently engaged in a deep ocean expedition and is not available for communication." Hardy exchanged a glance with Ryan before continuing. "Please inform Dr. Hamish that this concerns the debt from the Io incident. He'll understand." Another longer pause followed. Then, the voice returned noticeably less formal. "Stand by, Persistent." Several minutes passed in tense silence. Then, the communication channel activated again, this time showing a visual feed of a tired-looking middle-aged man with a wild shock of red hair and a neatly trimmed beard. "Hardy," the man said without preamble. "I haven't seen you since that mess on Io. What's this about calling in my debt?" "Dr. Hamish," Hardy acknowledged with a nod. "We need your help. Specifically, we need a sample of the bioluminescent algae from Europa's subsurface ocean. It's a matter of life and death." Hamish's eyebrows rose. "The Europan light. That's a highly regulated biological specimen. I can't just hand it over even for an old debt." Ryan stepped into view of the camera. "Please, Dr. Hamish. A Lumidian is dying of stellar cascade syndrome. The algae contains compounds that could save her life. The Vexillians refused treatment because they decided she wasn't worth the resources." Something in Hamish's expression shifted at the mention of the Vexillians. "Bloody calculating machines in doctor's clothing," he muttered. "I've had my own run-ins with their efficiency metrics. But you have to understand my position. Research Station Alpha suffered a containment breach last week. The entire moon is under quarantine protocols. If I'm caught transferring biological specimens off-world right now, I'll lose my research credentials." "We're not asking you to send it to us officially," Hardy said. "We just need enough of the algae to treat one patient." Hamish ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, clearly conflicted. "The algae you need is found at depths of over 3,000 meters. My team has an expedition scheduled to those depths tomorrow. I could collect a sample then." "How long would that take?" Ryan asked anxiously. "The entire expedition is a 12-hour round trip. We're studying thermal vent ecosystems, where the algae flourishes." Ryan did a quick mental calculation. If it took 12 hours for Hamish to collect the sample, plus their return journey time to Earth, it would be cutting it extremely close to Vonra's 72-hour limit. "There's no way to get it sooner," he pressed. Hamish shook his head. "Not unless you want to pilot a deep-sea submersible through 3 kilometers of pitch-black ocean yourself." Hardy and Ryan exchanged looks. "Actually," Hardy said slowly, "that might be exactly what we want to do." "You can't be serious," Hamish sputtered. "These are highly specialized vehicles requiring extensive training to operate safely." "I've piloted similar craft in the methane seas of Titan," Hardy countered. "And we don't have the luxury of waiting for your scheduled expedition." A tense silence followed as Hamish visibly wrestled with the decision. Finally, he sighed heavily. "I might regret this, but I can give you access to one of our independent research submersibles. It's currently docked at Underwater Access Point 17B. I'll transmit the access codes and basic operating instructions." "Thank you, Dr. Hamish," Ryan said sincerely. "Don't thank me yet," Hamish warned. "You still have to navigate to the thermal vents, collect the algae without contaminating it, and return to the surface undetected by Research Station Alpha's monitoring systems. And all of this assumes you can even dock with our facility without being spotted." "We can handle it," Hardy assured him. "Grex has been modifying our sensor profile. With the right approach trajectory, we should be able to slip past Alpha's detection grid." "Your funeral," Hamish muttered. "I'll transmit the coordinates for a discrete approach to Beta's secondary docking port. It's currently unmanned due to staff reallocation during the quarantine. The debt from Io is cleared after this," Hardy confirmed. Hamish nodded grimly. "Assuming you survive, yes. Stand by for data transmission." As the communication ended, Ryan looked to Hardy. "Can we really pilot a deep-sea submersible?" "We is perhaps optimistic," Hardy replied. "I can pilot it. You'll be along to identify and collect the algae sample. Grex will remain with the ship ready for a quick departure when we return." The coordinates and access codes from Hamish arrived moments later, along with detailed schematics of the submersible and the underwater geography surrounding the thermal vents. "This is going to be challenging," Hardy admitted, as he studied the information. "The pressure at 3,000 meters is crushing. The water temperature near the vents fluctuates between near freezing and boiling, and the area is home to some rather unusual life forms." "But it's possible," Ryan pressed. Hardy's expression was impossible to read. "Possible, yes. Advisable, absolutely not. But since when has that stopped either of us?" With that less than reassuring assessment, Hardy returned to the navigation controls and began plotting their approach to Research Station Beta. The Persistent slipped into Europa's orbit, using the Moon itself to shield them from the more comprehensive monitoring systems of Research Station Alpha. Hardy's piloting was precise, almost artistic in its execution, as he guided the ship along a trajectory that minimized their sensor profile. Approaching Research Station Beta, he announced after nearly an hour of careful maneuvering. "Secondary docking port is coming into view." Through the viewport, Ryan could see the research station embedded in Europa's icy surface. Unlike the larger Alpha facility, Beta was a relatively modest structure, its presence marked mainly by a series of domes protruding from the ice, and several cylindrical structures that Ryan assumed were access ports to the ocean below. "Docking procedure initiated," Hardy said, his hands dancing over the controls. "Grex, maintain engine standby mode. We may need to leave in a hurry." "Engines ready for quick exit." Grex confirmed over the intercom. "Grex will watch for trouble." The ship shuddered slightly as it connected with the docking port. A series of metallic clanks and hisses indicated the airlock was engaging. "Pressure equalized," Hardy announced. "We're connected. Let's move quickly." They donned insulated environment suits designed to protect against the extreme cold of Europa's surface. Hardy led the way through the airlock and into the research station. As Hamish had promised, the secondary docking area was deserted, the lights dimmed to minimal levels. "This way," Hardy said, consulting a schematic on his wrist display. "Submersible bay should be 2 levels down." They moved swiftly through the quiet facility, encountering no one. Ryan wondered if the entire station was as empty staffed as this section, or if they were simply lucky in their timing. The submersible bay was a large chamber, with a circular pool in the center, the dark waters leading directly to the ocean below. Docked at one edge of the pool was the submersible, a sleek, pod-like vehicle with multiple manipulator arms and powerful external lights. "That's our ride," Hardy said, approaching a control panel beside the submersible. He entered the access codes Hamish had provided, and the vehicle's systems hummed to life status lights, blinking from red to green. "Have you really piloted one of these before?" Ryan asked, eyeing the complex controls visible through the submersible's transparent canopy. "Similar enough," Hardy replied, with what Ryan was coming to recognize as his characteristic understatement. The principles are the same across most deep-sea exploration vehicles. The rest is just a matter of adapting to the specific interface. They boarded the submersible through a top hatch, settling into the compact interior. The control panel surrounded the pilot's seat in a semicircle, with a secondary station beside it, that Ryan assumed would be his position. Hardy familiarized himself with the controls for several minutes, occasionally referencing the operation manual Hamish had transmitted. Finally, he looked to Ryan with a nod. "Ready." Despite his apprehension, Ryan nodded. "Ready." Hardy activated the submersible's release mechanism. With a gentle lurch, they detached from the docking clamps and began to descend into the pool. Water rose around the transparent canopy until they were fully submerged, the lights of the bay now diffused and wavering through the liquid medium. Beginning descent. Hardy announced, manipulating controls that took them deeper through an artificial tunnel cut through Europa's ice shell. "We should reach the actual ocean in approximately 5 minutes. Ryan checked the collection equipment he had brought. Specialized containers designed to preserve biological samples in their natural state. "Once we find the algae, how do we collect it without contamination?" "The submersible has external sampling arms, specifically designed for that purpose," Hardy explained, pointing to controls on Ryan's panel. "You'll operate them when we reach the thermal vent area." They emerged from the ice tunnel into the vast, dark expanse of Europa's subsurface ocean. The submersible's powerful external lights illuminated the immediate area, but beyond their reach was nothing but impenetrable blackness. "Depth is currently 217 meters, Hardy reported, setting course for the thermal vent coordinates. The descent was both mesmerizing and unnerving. As they went deeper, the pressure outside increased enormously, causing occasional creaks and groans from the submersible's hull. The water remained dark and seemingly empty until they reached approximately 1,000 meters. "Look," Hardy said, pointing to something floating past their viewport. It resembled a delicate translucent umbrella, trailing long, glowing filaments. "European jellyfish analog. Bioluminescent, but not the algae we're looking for." As they continued deeper, more life forms appeared. Strange alien creatures adapted to the lightless, high-pressure environment. Some resembled earthfish, but with exaggerated features. Others were so unlike anything Ryan had seen that he struggled to categorize them. 12,500 meters, Hardy announced. "We're approaching the thermal vent field. You should start to see some ambient light soon." True to his word, a faint blue-green glow began to appear below them. As they descended further, the glow resolved into discrete points of light, a forest of luminescent structures surrounding the base of what looked like underwater chimneys. "The thermal vents," Hardy explained. "Superheated water rich in minerals erupts from those chimneys, creating a unique ecosystem. The algae thrives in the temperature gradient between the hot vent water and the cold ocean." He maneuvered the submersible closer to one of the vents, careful to maintain a safe distance from the superheated plume emerging from its top. "There," Ryan said, pointing to patches of brilliantly glowing material growing on the vent's surface. "That must be it." The algae was beautiful, a living constellation of blue-green stars clinging to the black rock of the vent. Its light pulsed gently, creating patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like a form of communication. "Extending sampling arm," Hardy said. "Controls are now active at your station. You'll need to collect several different samples to ensure we have the right variant." Ryan carefully operated the external manipulator, guiding it toward the glowing patches. The arm terminated in a specialized collection tool that could extract samples without damaging them. He positioned it over a particularly vibrant cluster of algae and activated the collection sequence. The process was delicate and time-consuming. They needed to collect enough of the algae to be useful for Vanra's treatment, but not so much as to damage the ecosystem or draw attention to their activity. Ryan worked methodically, filling 3 separate sample containers with different variants of the bioluminescent organism. "That should be sufficient," he said, finally securing the last container. "Now, we just need to get back to the surface." Hardy nodded and began the ascent procedure. "We need to manage our rise carefully. Too fast and the rapid pressure change could damage both us and the samples." The journey upward seemed to take even longer than the descent. Ryan found himself constantly checking the time, acutely aware of every minute that passed. Vanra's life was measured in hours now, and they still had to return to Earth with their precious cargo. They were approaching the ice tunnel when an alert sounded on Hardy's control panel. "What is it?" Ryan asked anxiously. Hardy's expression was grim. "We've been detected. Research Station Alpha is hailing all vessels in European waters and demanding identification." "What do we do?" "Ignore it and accelerate," Hardy decided. "Once we reach the submersible bay, we need to move extremely quickly back to the Persistent." He increased their ascent rate, pushing the submersible faster than was strictly safe. The hull creaked ominously under the stress of the rapid pressure change, but held together. They burst into the submersible bay's pool with a splash that echoed through the empty chamber. Hardy had the hatch open before they had fully docked, and they scrambled out with the precious algae samples secure in Ryan's pack. "Move," Hardy urged, leading the way back toward their docking port. "Alpha will be sending security to investigate by now." They raced through the corridors of Research Station Beta, retracing their path to the Persistent. As they reached the final stretch, a door at the far end of the corridor slid open, revealing two security officers in Earth Alliance uniforms. "Halt!" one of them shouted. "Identify yourselves!" "No time for that," Hardy muttered, pulling Ryan down a side passage. "Alternative route to the ship. Might be a bit exposed to vacuum, so keep your suit sealed." The alternative route turned out to be an external maintenance corridor that required them to cross a section of Europa's surface to reach their docking port. The bitter cold and near-vacuum conditions would have been fatal without their environment suits. They reached the Persistent just as alarms began to sound throughout Research Station Beta. Hardy cycled the airlock with practiced speed, and they tumbled into the ship, breathing hard. Grex, Hardy, called over the intercom as he raced for the bridge. "Prepare for immediate departure emergency protocol." "Engines already hot," came the Araxian's reply. Grex saw trouble coming. Ryan secured the algae samples in a specialized containment unit as Hardy initiated the undocking sequence. The ship shuddered as it pulled away from the research station more forcefully than was standard procedure. "We've got company," Hardy announced grimly as they cleared the docking area. "Security vessel from Research Station Alpha is on an intercept course." Through the viewport, Ryan could see a sleek, official-looking craft rising from another section of Europa's surface, its running lights flashing in pursuit pattern. "Can we outrun them?" Hardy's hands flew over the navigation controls. "We're going to find out. Grex, I need everything the engines have got. We're going for another Jupiter slingshot." "Engines at 110% capacity," Grex reported. "More than that will cause meltdown." 110 will have to do," Hardy said. He turned to Ryan. "Secure yourself. This is going to be a rough ride." Ryan barely had time to strap himself into a seat before the Persistent leapt forward with stomach-churning acceleration. The security vessel fell behind, momentarily surprised by their sudden burst of speed, but quickly adjusted course to follow. "They're hailing us," Hardy noted, "ordering us to power down and prepare for boarding." "Are we going to comply?" Ryan asked, already knowing the answer. Hardy's reply was to increase their speed even further. "Grex, what's the status of our sensor mask?" "Active but not perfect," the engineer replied. "They know general direction, not exact position." "That will have to be enough," Hardy said. He plotted a course that would take them on another close approach to Jupiter, using the massive planet's gravity to accelerate them on a trajectory back toward Earth. The security vessel continued its pursuit, gradually closing the distance. "They're faster than I expected," Hardy admitted. "Earth Alliance must have upgraded their enforcement vessels since I left the service." "Can we still make the slingshot?" "Yes, but it's going to be extremely close, and they'll likely follow us through it." The massive form of Jupiter grew larger in their viewport as both ships hurtled toward the gas giant. Hardy's hands moved with precision over the controls, making minute adjustments to their approach vector. "Entering Jupiter's gravitational field," he announced. "Grex, I need a controlled power surge to the main engines on my mark." "Ready," the Araxian confirmed. "But engine core temperature already very high. Dangerous." "Noted," Hardy acknowledged. 3, 2, 1, mark." The ship lurched as Grex channeled extra power to the engines. The security vessel behind them attempted to match their maneuver, but wasn't positioned optimally for the gravity assist. As they swung around Jupiter in a tight arc, the difference became apparent. The Persistent gained tremendous velocity from the slingshot effect, while the security vessel's less-than-ideal approach resulted in a wider, slower trajectory. "It worked!" Ryan exclaimed as the distance between the ships began to increase. "We're pulling away from them." "For now," Hardy cautioned. "But they'll report our heading to Earth authorities. We'll be expected when we arrive." "How long until we reach Earth?" Hardy checked their navigation data. "At our current velocity, approximately 17 hours. We've made good time with that slingshot." Ryan calculated quickly. They had spent about 36 hours getting to Europa and collecting the algae. With 17 more hours to return to Earth, that would leave them just under 20 hours of Vonra's 72-hour window. It would be cutting it close, but they might just make it. "Let's hope the algae works," he said quietly. Hardy nodded. "Indeed. Now get some rest if you can. When we reach Earth orbit, things are likely to get complicated again." The return journey was tense but uneventful. The Persistent maintained its high-velocity course toward Earth, while Hardy, Ryan, and Grex took turns monitoring for pursuit. The algae samples remained secure in their containment unit, their bioluminescence occasionally visible through the transparent sections of the storage vessel. As they approached Earth, Hardy called Ryan and Grex to the bridge for a strategy session. "Earth Alliance security will be watching for us," the captain explained. "They'll have received reports from Europa by now. Standard procedure would be to intercept us in high orbit and force a boarding action." "So how do we avoid that?" Ryan asked. "We don't head for high orbit," Hardy said simply. "We're going to make a direct atmospheric insertion at a steep angle that should confuse their tracking systems. It's risky. The ship will experience extreme stress, but it's our best chance of reaching the surface without interception." Grex's multifaceted eyes gleamed with what might have been excitement. "Need special shielding configuration. Grex will modify. Very hot, very dangerous, very fun." As the engineer hurried off to make the necessary adjustments, Hardy turned to Ryan. "Once we're in the atmosphere, we'll aim for a landing zone as close to Kazara's clinic as possible. You'll need to be ready to move quickly with the algae samples." "What about you and Grex? You'll both be arrested if you're caught." Hardy shrugged. "Risk of the profession. But don't worry about us. The Persistent has a few more tricks up her sleeve. We'll make ourselves scarce once you're safely away." The blue sphere of Earth grew larger in their viewport. Hardy carefully adjusted their approach vector, aiming for a gap in the orbital monitoring network. "Atmospheric insertion in 5 minutes," he announced. "Brace for turbulence." The ship began to vibrate as they hit the upper layers of Earth's atmosphere. The vibration quickly intensified to a violent shaking that made Ryan's teeth rattle. The external hull temperature skyrocketed as friction heated the ship's surface to near melting point. Hull integrity holding Grex reported from engineering, having to shout over the noise of the straining ship. "Barely." Flames became visible outside the viewport as the air around the ship ionized from the heat of their passage. The control panels flickered as power fluctuated throughout the vessel. "We're being hailed by Earth Alliance Air Defense," Hardy noted, glancing at a communication alert. "They're demanding we abort our descent and assume a standard approach vector." "Are we responding?" Ryan asked, gripping his seat as the ship lurched violently. "That would be counterproductive," Hardy replied with remarkable calm, given the circumstances. The captain's hands remained steady on the controls as he guided the Persistent through its punishing descent. The worst of the turbulence began to subside as they reached the lower atmosphere. Through breaks in the cloud cover, Ryan could see the landscape of southwestern North America coming into view. "I'm detecting pursuit craft launching from Phoenix Air Defense Station," Hardy announced. "Estimated intercept in 12 minutes. Can we land before they reach us?" "Yes, but it will be close." Hardy adjusted their course slightly. "I've identified a suitable landing zone approximately 3 kilometers from Kazara's clinic. It's the best I can do without setting down in the middle of the city." The Persistent continued its rapid descent, now flying horizontally, but still at a speed far beyond safety regulations for populated areas. Buildings and streets became visible below as they approached New Phoenix. 30 seconds to landing," Hardy announced. "It's going to be rough. Secure the algae samples." Ryan double-checked the containment unit, making sure it was properly sealed and padded against impact. The ship dropped lower, aiming for what appeared to be an abandoned industrial lot on the outskirts of the city. "Brace," Hardy called as he initiated the landing sequence. The Persistent touched down hard its landing struts, absorbing most of the impact, but still sending a jarring shock through the ship. It skidded several hundred meters before coming to a stop in a cloud of dust and debris. "Everyone alive?" Hardy asked, already unbuckling from his seat. "In relative terms," Ryan replied, checking that the algae samples had survived intact. They had. Grex emerged from engineering looking slightly singed, but otherwise unharmed. "Good landing. Ship mostly intact. Only small fires." "Time to move," Hardy urged, leading the way to the exit ramp. "Those pursuit craft will be here very soon." The ramp descended to reveal the dusty lot around them. In the distance, Ryan could hear the wail of emergency sirens approaching. 3 kilometers that way," Hardy said, pointing toward the city center. "You should be able to find transportation easily enough once you reach the main road." "What about you two?" Ryan asked. "We'll be fine," Hardy assured him. "The Persistent still has enough power for one more short hop, just enough to relocate to a more discreet location. Now go quickly." Ryan hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Thank you, both of you. I couldn't have done this without your help." "Save the Lumidian," Grex said simply. "Make worth risk." With the precious container of algae samples clutched securely against his chest, Ryan ran from the ship toward the city streets. Behind him, he heard the Persistent's engines powering up again for one final short flight to safety. Reaching the main road, Ryan was able to flag down an autonomous taxi. "Arcturan Veterinary Clinic North Sector," he instructed, just as he had nearly 3 days ago at the start of this improbable journey. "Emergency priority." As the taxi sped through the streets of New Phoenix, Ryan checked his risk communicator. Almost 68 hours had passed since he had found Vanra abandoned outside the Vixillian hospital. He was cutting it extremely close. The Arcturan Veterinary Clinic came into view, looking exactly as he had left it. Ryan paid the taxi and hurried inside the container of algae samples, held carefully in his arms. "Kazara," he called as he burst through the front door. I've got the algae." The Arcturan veterinarian emerged from the back room, her 4 eyes widening in surprise. "Ryan, you actually made it back. I was beginning to worry." "How is she?" Ryan asked anxiously. "Vanra, is she still—" "Alive, yes, but only barely," Kazara said, leading him quickly to the examination room. "The stasis field has slowed the progression of the syndrome, but her vital signs have been deteriorating steadily for the past 6 hours. You've returned just in time." Vanra lay on the examination table, enclosed in a softly humming stasis field that gave her an ethereal, ghostly appearance. Through the field, Ryan could see that her internal light had dimmed to an alarming extent. Just the faintest pulses of illumination now visible through her translucent skin. "Will the algae work?" he asked, handing the container to Kazara. "We're about to find out," the Arcturan replied, carefully, opening the sealed unit. The bioluminescent algae inside cast a blue-green glow across the room, reminding Ryan of the thermal vent fields of Europa, where they had harvested it. Kazara worked with practiced efficiency, transferring samples of the algae to a medical processor that would extract and concentrate the compounds needed for treatment. Ryan watched anxiously as she prepared the treatment, conscious of every passing minute. The algae contains compounds similar to the enzymes that power Lumidian light organs, Kazara explained as she worked. In theory, these compounds should help restart Vanra's internal light production system and halt the cascade failure of her other organs. In theory, Ryan repeated nervously. Medicine is never certain, especially xenomedicine, Kazara admitted. But I've studied similar cases. The principles are sound. The processor completed its cycle, producing 3 vials of concentrated, brilliantly glowing liquid. Kazara carefully loaded them into an injection device. I'll need to temporarily disable the stasis field, she said. Be ready. She may experience a shock response when the field drops. Ryan nodded, moving to stand beside Vanra's head where he could monitor her reaction. Kazara disabled the stasis field. Immediately, Vanra's body tensed, a soft moan escaping her lips. The first sound Ryan had heard her make since finding her in the alley. Working quickly, Kazara administered the first injection directly into one of Vanra's primary light organs, visible through her translucent skin. The glowing liquid dispersed into the organ, seeming to briefly increase its faint pulsing. First dose delivered, Kazara announced. Now we wait 30 seconds before the second dose. Those 30 seconds seemed to stretch into eternity, as Ryan watched for any sign of improvement. Vanra's breathing remained shallow, her internal light still dangerously dim. Kazara administered the second injection to a different light organ. This time, Ryan thought he detected a slightly stronger response. The organ's pulsing became more regular, though still weak. Final dose, Kazara said, preparing the third injection. This is the most concentrated formula. It should trigger a cascading reaction throughout her light production system. As the third dose of the algae extract entered Vanra's system, something remarkable happened. The light organ that received the injection flared, suddenly brightening to an intensity that made Ryan squint. Then, like a power surge traveling through a grid, the illumination spread to adjacent organs and tissues. Vanra's entire body convulsed, once, then relaxed. For a terrifying moment, all light within her seemed to extinguish completely. Then, starting from her core and radiating outward, a wave of bioluminescence began to spread through her body. "It's working!" Kazara exclaimed, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly in excitement. "Her light production system is reactivating." The wave of light continued to spread until Vanra's entire body was glowing with a steady, healthy luminescence. Her breathing deepened and regularized, and her internal organs began functioning with renewed vigor. Vanra's eyes fluttered open, those remarkable eyes with galaxies swirling in their depths. They focused on Ryan, recognition dawning in them. "You," she whispered, her voice melodic but weak. "You were in the alley." "Yes," Ryan confirmed, surprised, and moved that she remembered him. "My name is Ryan. You're in an Arcturan veterinary clinic. This is Kazara. She's been caring for you." Vanra's gaze shifted to the Arcturan. Veterinarian." Despite her weakness, there was a note of amusement in her voice. "It was that, or let the Vexillian's decision stand," Kazara explained gently. "You were suffering from stellar cascade syndrome. We've treated you with compounds derived from Europan bioluminescent algae." "Europa," Vanra's eyes widened slightly. "You went to Europa. For me—" "Ryan did," Kazara confirmed. "Quite the adventure from what I gather." Vanra's gaze returned to Ryan, a look of wonder on her delicate features. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Ryan struggled to articulate his motivations. "I couldn't just walk away," he said finally. "The Vexillians left you to die because they decided you weren't worth saving. I disagreed with their assessment." A soft glow pulsed beneath Vanra's skin. What Ryan would later learn was the Lumidian equivalent of an emotional blush. "Thank you," she said simply. "I owe you my life." Before Ryan could respond, Kazara, who had been monitoring Vanra's vital signs, made a startled sound. "That's unexpected," the Arcturan murmured, studying a holographic display of Vanra's internal systems. "What is it?" Ryan asked anxiously. "Is something wrong?" Not wrong precisely, Kazara said, adjusting the display to focus on a particular area. But definitely surprising. Vanra, were you aware that you're carrying a child? Vanra's eyes widened in shock. Child, that's impossible. I haven't been with a Lumidian male in over a year. Not a pure Lumidian child, Kazara clarified, studying the readings more closely. The genetic markers indicate a hybrid, a human Lumidian hybrid. That's impossible, Ryan echoed Vanra's earlier statement. Humans and Lumidians aren't cross-fertile. The xenobiology is completely different. Generally true, Kazara agreed. But I'm detecting human DNA integrated with Lumidian genetic material. It's in the very early stages of development, but it's definitely there. Vanra's hand moved to rest protectively over her abdomen. Tiras, she whispered. My human partner. We were together before he was transferred off-world 3 months ago. But all the medical literature says cross-species conception isn't possible without significant genetic engineering. Medical literature has been wrong before, Kazara noted, continuing to study the readings. Particularly when it comes to rare events. The integration appears stable, which is the most surprising part. Normally, such genetic combinations would be non-viable. A theory began to form in Ryan's mind. Could it be related to the stellar cascade syndrome? He asked. Maybe the stress on her system from being far from her home star somehow affected her reproductive biology? Kazara's ears perked up, a sign of intellectual interest. An intriguing hypothesis. Stress-induced genetic adaptability has been documented in other species. The syndrome might have activated dormant mechanisms designed to ensure species survival under extreme conditions. Whatever the explanation, the reality was undeniable. Somehow, against all scientific expectation, Vanra was carrying a human Lumidian hybrid child, possibly the first of its kind. Is the child in danger from the syndrome? Vanra asked, concern evident in her voice. I don't believe so, Kazara reassured her. The treatment appears to have stabilized your light production system completely, and the fetus shows normal development patterns, albeit with its unique genetic makeup. Vanra relaxed slightly, though her expression remained thoughtful. Tiras should know, she said softly, if he can be contacted. We'll help you find him, Ryan promised. But first you need to rest and recover fully. As if on cue, a chime sounded from the clinic's security system. Kazara checked a monitor, and her ears flattened against her head. It seems our actions have not gone unnoticed, she said grimly. There are Vexillian officials at the door, accompanied by Earth Alliance security officers. Ryan's heart sank. He had known there would be consequences for his actions, but had hoped for a little more time before facing them. Let me talk to them, he said, straightening his shoulders. This was my decision. You and Vanra shouldn't suffer for it. No, Vanra said, sitting up despite her weakness. They abandoned me to die. I will not hide from them now. Before either Ryan or Kazara could protest, the main door to the examination room slid open. 2 Vexillian medical officials entered, followed by a human officer in Earth Alliance uniform. Their expressions ranged from stern to openly hostile. Ryan Mercer. The human officer began formally. You are under investigation for multiple violations of the Earth Vexillian Health Accord, illegal access to a restricted research zone, theft of biological specimens, and interference with Vexillian medical protocols. One of the Vexillians stepped forward, their faceted eyes reflecting the light coldly. The subject was determined to be resource inefficient for treatment. Your intervention has disrupted established medical resource allocation protocols. Her name is Vanra, Ryan said firmly, not the subject, and she's alive because of our disruption of your protocols. The individual outcome is irrelevant, the Vexillian replied. The systemic efficiency of resource allocation must be maintained for optimal healthcare distribution. Vanra rose from the examination table, her internal light pulsing with what Ryan interpreted as anger. Is my child also irrelevant to your calculations? She asked, her melodic voice, now sharp with challenge. The Vexillian's head tilted slightly, a gesture of confusion. Child, our assessment detected no offspring. A human Lumidian hybrid. Kazara explained, displaying the medical readings on a larger holographic projection. The first documented case of natural cross-species fertility between humans and Lumidians. This revelation caused visible consternation among the Vexillians. They conferred with each other in rapid clicking speech that the translation systems couldn't fully process. The human officer looked equally surprised. "Is this confirmed?" he asked Kazara. "The genetic markers are unmistakable," the Arcturan veterinarian confirmed. "It's a viable human Lumidian embryo approximately 12 weeks into development." The implications of this discovery were not lost on anyone in the room. A naturally occurring human-alien hybrid represented a scientific breakthrough of immense significance. It also raised complex ethical, legal, and political questions that no existing framework was fully equipped to address. After several tense moments, the Vexillians turned back to face the group. "This development alters the assessment parameters," the lead Vexillian stated. "The subject Vanra now represents a high-value research opportunity. Our protocols dictate that she should be transferred to a specialized Vexillian research facility for monitoring and study." "Absolutely not," Ryan said firmly, stepping between Vanra and the Vexillians. "She's a person, not a research specimen." "I concur," the Earth Alliance officer said, surprising everyone. Earth Alliance laws regarding sentient rights would classify any attempt to detain her for research purposes without consent as illegal detention. The Vexillians' faceted eyes flickered, a sign of frustration. "Earth Alliance agreed to honor Vexillian medical protocols as part of our bilateral health agreement. This intervention constitutes a violation of that agreement." "Perhaps," the Earth Alliance officer acknowledged. "But the discovery of a viable human-alien hybrid creates a situation not covered by the existing agreement. This will require diplomatic resolution at a higher level." A tense standoff ensued as both parties considered their next moves. It was Vanra who finally broke the silence. "I appreciate the scientific significance of my condition," she said, her voice steady despite her weakened state. "And I am willing to participate in non-invasive research that might benefit both our species. But I will not be treated as a specimen, and I will not be separated from the people who saved my life when your protocols deemed me disposable." Her words carried a quiet dignity that seemed to affect even the Vexillians. The lead Vexillian's posture shifted subtly. "A compromise may be possible," they said finally. "Voluntary participation in a joint Earth-Vexillian research initiative, with guaranteed rights and autonomy for the subject for Vanra." The Earth Alliance officer nodded. "That seems reasonable, provided Vanra has final say over all procedures and can withdraw at any time." "And what about the charges against Ryan?" Kazara asked. "And my involvement in treating a patient outside my licensed parameters." The officer looked uncomfortable. "That's more complicated. There were multiple regulatory violations, which saved a life that your Vexillian partners had written off," Kazara interrupted. "And in doing so led to a discovery of potentially historic significance." "If charges are pursued against those who saved me," Vanra added, "I will make it publicly known that the Vexillian Health Authority abandoned me to die in an alley. I doubt that would benefit diplomatic relations." The implied threat hung in the air. The Vexillians conferred again in their clicking language before responding. "We propose an alternative resolution," the lead Vexillian said. "No charges will be filed regarding this specific incident. In exchange, the involved parties will agree to participate in the joint research initiative and maintain confidentiality about certain details of the case." "Specifically, the abandonment detail, I presume," Ryan said dryly. The Vexillian did not directly acknowledge this but continued. "This resolution preserves diplomatic relations while allowing for scientific advancement beneficial to both species." After some further negotiation, an agreement was reached. Vanra would participate voluntarily in research under the joint supervision of Earth and Vexillian scientists, but would maintain full autonomy and rights. Ryan and Kazara would not face charges for their actions, though Ryan's involvement with the Europa algae collection would be officially recorded as authorized emergency xenobiological sample retrieval, rather than acknowledged as the rule-breaking expedition it had actually been. As for Captain Hardy and Grex, their involvement would be deliberately left unmentioned in all official records. The Persistent had successfully evaded detection after dropping Ryan off, and both Hardy and Grex had extensive experience in remaining untraceable when necessary. In the weeks that followed, Vanra's health continued to improve. The European algae treatment had fully restored her light production system, and her pregnancy progressed normally, or as normally as could be expected for a completely unprecedented cross-species gestation. Ryan found himself increasingly drawn to Vanra's company during her recovery. What had begun as a spontaneous act of compassion for a stranger evolved into genuine friendship and eventually something deeper. Vanra's partner, Tiras, was located on a mining outpost in the asteroid belt, and after being informed of the situation, he returned to Earth to reunite with Vanra. To Ryan's surprise, the reunion was bittersweet. While Tiras was amazed and moved by the news of the child, he had already established a new relationship during his posting. The separation with Vanra became permanent, though amicable, with Tiras agreeing to maintain contact and involvement in the child's life, while recognizing that he would not be its primary parent. Unexpected as it was, Ryan found himself stepping into that role. His connection with Vanra deepened as they navigated the challenges of her unprecedented pregnancy together. The Lumidian's perspective on life, philosophical, artistic, and profoundly aware of the interplay of light and shadow, complemented Ryan's more practical problem-solving nature. They formed a partnership that transcended the conventional boundaries of human relationships. 6 months after the Europa expedition, Vanra and Ryan found themselves aboard an orbital medical facility specializing in xenobiological procedures. The birth of their child, a daughter they named Nova, was attended by a carefully selected team of human Vexillian and Arcturan medical professionals, including Kazara, who had been granted special privileges to participate. Nova emerged into the world with skin that was only partially translucent, revealing muted light organs that pulsed in rhythm with her tiny heartbeat. Her eyes, when they opened, contained the swirling galaxies of her Lumidian heritage, but with flecks of Ryan's hazel color mixed into the cosmic patterns. She was in every sense a perfect blend of both species, a living bridge between two evolutionary paths that had developed light years apart. "She's beautiful," Ryan whispered, holding the newborn carefully as Vanra rested from the exertion of delivery. "I never imagined any of this when I found you that night." Vanra smiled, her internal light glowing with the Lumidian expression of deep joy. "The universe works in patterns we cannot always predict," she said. "Sometimes the most unlikely connections form the strongest bonds." The news of Nova's birth was carefully managed by Earth Alliance Diplomatic Corps. While the scientific significance of the event was widely reported, the circumstances that had led to it, Ryan's rescue of Vanra from Vexillian abandonment, the illegal expedition to Europa, the veterinary treatment that had saved her life, remained known only to a select few. For the Vexillians, the case represented a challenge to their resource allocation protocols. The existence of Nova proved that their algorithmic approach to healthcare sometimes missed variables of immense significance. Some progressive factions within the Vexillian medical establishment began advocating for revisions to their efficiency metrics, arguing that more weight should be given to potential outcomes beyond immediate resource calculations. For Ryan, Vanra, and Nova, the future held both promise and uncertainty. Their family was unprecedented, a new kind of relationship that would inevitably face challenges from both human and Lumidian societies. But as they stood together in the observation deck of the orbital facility, Earth glowing blue and green below them, and the stars stretching into infinity, above those challenges seemed surmountable. "What happens now?" Ryan asked, cradling Nova against his chest as she slept peacefully, her small body emitting a gentle pulsing glow. Vanra's hand found her cool, slightly textured skin, now familiar and comforting against his own. "Now we discover who we are as a family," she said. "We create our own protocols based not on calculated efficiency, but on compassion and connection." Ryan nodded, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this point. From that cold alley behind the Vexillian hospital, to the depths of Europa's subsurface ocean, to this moment of new beginning, every step had been guided by the simple human belief that saving a life was worth any risk, any sacrifice. "Sometimes," he said, echoing a thought that had come to him during their ordeal, "the most human solution is the one that breaks all the rules." Vanra's internal light pulsed in agreement, patterns of illumination flowing beneath her translucent skin, in what Ryan had come to recognize as her laughter. "And sometimes," she added, "it takes a veterinarian to teach medical doctors about healing." As if in response, Nova stirred in Ryan's arms, her tiny light organs brightening momentarily before settling back into their gentle rhythm. In that pulse of light, Ryan saw the future, not just for their family, but for the understanding between species. Sometimes, he reflected, the greatest breakthroughs in connection came not from careful diplomatic negotiation or scientific research, but from simple acts of compassion that transcended the boundaries of biology policy and space itself. The Vexillian Health Authority would eventually revise its protocols to include potential variables beyond immediate resource calculations. Earth Alliance would establish new guidelines for cross-species medical intervention. Scientists would study Nova's unique physiology for insights into genetic compatibility previously thought impossible. But for Ryan, the most important outcome was much simpler. A family created through an act of defiance against cold calculation, a love that had literally crossed the barriers of biology, and a little girl whose very existence represented hope for a future where compassion trumped efficiency, and where the light within every sentient being, human Lumidian, or something beautifully in between, was recognized as worthy of preservation, no matter the cost. As they stood together, the stars of Earth's orbital night stretching into infinity around them, Ryan knew that some journeys never truly ended. This one, begun in a dark alley with an abandoned patient, had transformed into something none of them could have predicted. And whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, guided by the light they had fought so hard to preserve. In the years that followed, Ryan, Vanra, and Nova would establish a life that bridged their different worlds. They would face challenges from both societies, navigate the unique developmental patterns of a hybrid child, and occasionally require Hardy and Grex's services for emergency transport when conventional medical solutions fell short. Kazara would become not just their doctor, but a cherished family friend, her clinic expanding to include a wing dedicated to cross-species medicine inspired by Nova's case. The Arcturan's approach, combining the biological knowledge of veterinary practice with the ethical framework of personhood, would gradually influence mainstream xenomedicine, challenging the Vexillian emphasis on resource efficiency. And occasionally, when the bureaucracy of established medical systems failed, those deemed resource inefficient, Ryan and Vanra would find themselves opening their door to those in need, creating an underground network that connected those abandoned by the system with those willing to help outside official channels. For in the end, they had learned firsthand that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply to care to see value where others saw only cost, and to recognize that every light, no matter how dim it might appear in the moment, had the potential to illuminate entire worlds if given the chance to shine.